Welcome back to the deep dive. We are thrilled to have you sitting at the table with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Let's just jump straight into the deep end today because we are venturing into a world that is equal parts blood-soaked, sharply hilarious, and carrying an almost impossible level of hype right now.
Unbelievable hype.
We are tearing into the upcoming, highly anticipated film, Ready or Not To, Here I Come.
It's a sequel that is just completely dominating the cultural conversation in the genre space right now. And frankly, the industry data we have on this is pointing to a massive cinematic event.
Huge. And we don't just skim the surface here. To give you the most comprehensive three-dimensional look at what's coming, we have compiled an absolute mountain of source material.
A literal stack.
Right. We are talking a massive stack of entertainment news features, an incredibly revealing exclusive Collider video interview transcript featuring the primary cast.
That interview is wild, by the way.
So good. Plus, we have a series of behind-the-scenes production featurettes, a deeply chaotic and entertaining Reddit AMA with the stars, raw Wikipedia data, and the latest hard-hitting box office analytics.
We are pulling from every corner of the production to figure out exactly what this movie is.
And the reason we are dedicating our time to this specific film goes far beyond just, previewing a horror movie for you.
Exactly. Whether you are a hardcore genre fan who already has your opening night tickets secured, or you are simply fascinated by the architectural mechanics of how a quirky, mid-budget cult hit scales up into a massive, studio-backed global franchise.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Right. This analysis is going to give you the blueprint. We are going to distill every essential narrative detail, the hidden Easter eggs buried in the production, and the strategic behind-the-scenes maneuvering into one cohesive picture.
So you won't need to spend the next 40 hours scouring forums and trade magazines. We've synthesized it all for you right here.
We do the heavy lifting. You get the ultimate shortcut to being the most informed person in the room.
So let's kick this off by looking at the sheer phenomenon of this franchise and the brutal business of survival in Hollywood. We really have to contextualize what the original Ready or Not achieved back in 2019.
Because it was, by all industry metrics, a cinematic unicorn.
A total unicorn. I mean, this was a film that grossed $57 million worldwide. But the kicker, it was made on a microscopic $6 million budget.
In the current studio ecosystem, finding a return on investment like that is essentially catching lightning in a bottle.
It just doesn't happen.
It really doesn't. It is the absolute dream scenario for any studio executive greenlighting a genre picture. When you operate with a budget that tight, the margins for profitability are incredibly favorable, assuming the film finds an audience.
Which it absolutely did.
But the challenge always comes with the sequel. When you scale up, the expectations scale up with it, which makes the behind-the-scenes creative shifts on this project so vital to understand.
Yeah, let's talk about the directors, because there was a big shift there.
Originally, Adam Robitel, who has a solid pedigree with the Escape Room franchise, was attached to direct. But the sources confirmed that the radio silence duo, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette, ultimately stepped in to take the helm.
Which honestly feels like the only right move if you want to preserve the DNA of the original.
Oh, without a doubt.
When you look at what Radio Silence has done recently, revitalizing the Scream franchise, that wildly chaotic vampire ballerina movie, Abigail.
So much fun.
And their earlier work on anthologies like VHS and Southbound, they have a very specific, aggressive cinematic vocabulary.
You do.
They don't just do gore, they do physical comedy disguised as gore. Plus, the studio made the vital decision to bring back the original writers, Guy Busick and R. Christopher Murphy.
Retaining Busick and Murphy is arguably the most important data point in pre-production.
Why is that?
Because tonal consistency in horror comedy is notoriously fragile. If you lean too far into the comedy, the stakes evaporate. If you lean too heavily into the horror, the absurdity of the premise feels disjointed.
Right, it just feels mean.
Exactly. The original writers understand that highly specific tightrope walk, but where this really translates into measurable anticipation is in the marketing analytics.
Oh, the numbers are insane.
The trailer for Ready or Not 2 didn't just perform well, it fundamentally shattered Searchlight Pictures' internal viewership records. It pulled in 68 million views in its first 24 hours.
68 million. Just to anchor that number in reality for you, the previous record holder for Searchlight was the recent Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown.
Which was huge.
Massive. And that brought in 48 million views. They didn't just edge out the record, they obliterated it by 20 million views.
And what's fascinating, the box office analytics provided in our sources, is that This represents Searchlight's third best organic opening ever.
Third best.
It's sitting right behind absolute cultural behemoths like Slumdog Millionaire, The Shape of Water, and Black Swan.
That phrase, organic opening, is critical to define here, right? Because it illustrates the true strength of the property.
Yes. In studio marketing, you have paid reach. That's where the studio buys ad placements on YouTube, television spots, sponsored social media posts, to basically force the trailer in front of eyeballs.
Buying your way into the feed.
Right. Then you have organic reach. This is when users are actively sharing the trailer in their own group chats, retweeting it, and pushing it through the algorithm purely based on genuine interest and word of mouth.
So to rank third all-time for Searchlight and organic reach means the audience is doing the heavy lifting for them.
Exactly. And a massive driver of that organic reach. I mean, 33 million of those 68 million trailer views came exclusively from TikTok.
Which is almost half the total viewership. It completely underscores where movie marketing is won or lost right now.
It really does.
But why this movie specifically? Is there something inherent to Ready or Not that just acts like catnip for the TikTok algorithm?
Absolutely. TikTok's short-form algorithm is uniquely, almost perfectly, calibrated for the horror comedy genre. Think about the mechanics of the platform. It rewards immediate visual hooks, rapid pacing, and sudden subversions of expectation.
Right, you need to stop the scroll.
Horror comedy relies on quick, punchy setups and visceral visual payoffs. When you have a 3-second clip of a protagonist in a shredded, blood-soaked wedding dress, aggressively wielding a bizarre, improvised weapon, it creates an immediate visual dissonance.
You have to stop and figure out what you're looking at.
The platform's algorithm heavily weights watch time and shareability. Because these clips blend genuine suspense with dark laugh-out-loud absurdity, they are inherently shareable. It's the exact same algorithmic traction we saw propel films like M3GN or Smile into massive box office successes.
The visual itself is a meme before the movie even releases.
Exactly.
So the studio knows they have a viral monster on their hands. Which brings us to the absolutely fascinating chess game they are playing with the release date. Our sources show this date has been a totally moving target.
A lot of shuffling.
It was originally planted on April 10th, 2026. Then, Searchlight bumped it up to March 27. And finally, they locked in March 20, 2026, which is deliberately scheduled right after its world premiere at the SXSW Festival, which runs from March 12 to 18.
That kind of aggressive, multi-stage shifting of a release date is never accidental. It is a highly calculated maneuver based on granular demographic data.
Show me the numbers.
If we look closely at the ComScore statistics provided in the analytics report, the move to March 20 is a masterstroke in audience targeting. The data shows that during this specific mid-March window, precisely 38% of K-12 students and 37% of college students across the country will be on spring break.
They are essentially aiming a giant funnel right at the exact demographic that drives horror box office.
Yes, the spring break crowd is vital.
But it's not just about capturing the kids on break. It's also about avoiding getting cannibalized by other releases. When you look at the broader theatrical calendar, Searchlight is bobbing and weaving.
They really are.
On that March 20 date, they are currently positioned against Amazon MGM's sci-fi adaptation project Hail Mary and IFC's indie film Forbidden Fruits. Notice what's missing there.
Direct genre competition.
Exactly. Because originally, on that March 27 date, they were going to be staring down Warner Bros.' new horror film They Will Kill You.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
By moving up a week, they sidestep the direct horror clash and ensure they are the only adrenaline-pumping genre option for the spring break crowd.
It's incredibly smart.
But the really wild part is how Disney, which owns Searchlight, is actively rearranging their other massive studio tentpoles just to clear the runway for this movie.
The internal shifts are staggering.
They completely yanked Ridley Scott's highly anticipated post-apocalyptic film The Dog Stars from March and threw it all the way to August 2026.
Wow.
And they took Pixar's animated mobster cat movie Gato and pushed it an entire year to March 2027.
It demonstrates an immense, almost unprecedented level of internal confidence from the parent company. You don't delay a Ridley Scott epic or a Pixar tentpole unless you believe the mid-budget horror comedy you are clearing space for is going to be a massive financial juggernaut.
Right. They are treating Ready or Not as a niche genre sequel, but as a foundational pillar of their Q1 fiscal strategy.
It's the anchor.
Okay, so the business mechanics are locked in, the marketing is going viral, and the release date is weaponized. Let's pivot from the real-world timeline to the in-universe timeline of the movie itself.
Which is detailed in Section 2 of our sources.
Because the timeline they are playing with here is psychologically brutal. The sequel picks up 0 seconds later, the absolute exact seconds the first movie cuts to black.
From a narrative perspective, this is a remarkably bold choice. It denies the protagonist and the audience any semblance of a reset period.
Not at all.
If we recall the final moments of the 2019 film, Grace, played with incredible ferocity by Samara Weaving, is sitting on the stone steps of the burning Domas mansion.
Iconic shot.
She is covered head to toe in a thick layer of congealed blood, smoking a cigarette, having just witnessed her new husband and her entire extended family of in-laws literally detonate into explosions of gore because they failed their demonic ritual.
It is one of the greatest final frames in modern horror. And our sources reveal that the sequel begins right on those steps.
Right there.
The EMTs and the fire department pull up to the burning mansion. Grace is taken away. She wakes up in a hospital room and the nightmare instantly resumes.
We really need to unpack what this means for Grace as a character.
In the history of horror sequels, we usually see a time jump. The survivor gets a few years to process the trauma. Maybe they move to a new city. Maybe they spend a few years in a psychiatric facility like Sarah Connor.
Or they spend a decade preparing a fortified compound like Laurie Strode in Halloween.
Right, they get time to harden themselves. Grace gets nothing.
She hasn't had a week, a day, or even a few quiet hours to process the immense psychological shock of what she just survived. The trauma is entirely unresolved. It is an open, bleeding wound.
She's still running on that same tank of gas.
Exactly. She is still existing within the exact same spike of adrenaline that kept her alive through the night. This presents a massive challenge for the screenwriter and the actor. How do you arc a character who is already at a level 10 state of exhaustion and panic from the very first frame?
Samara Weaving actually addressed this exact challenge in the exclusive Collider video interview, and her approach is fascinating.
What did she say?
She explicitly stated that she aggressively pushed back against any notion that Grace would suddenly wake up in the hospital with, quote, incredible superhero skills.
Good.
She didn't want Grace to suddenly be John Wick just because she survived one night of terror.
Which is a remarkably grounded, intelligent approach to character continuity. The audience connected with Grace in the first film precisely because she was out of her depth.
She was just a normal person.
She was scrappy, terrified, and incredibly lucky. To suddenly grant her hyper-competent combat skills would sever that empathetic connection.
Weaving said she actively channeled the mentality of an exhausted soldier in the war. She specifically brought up the movie Lone Survivor, referencing the guy desperately clinging to a tree while taking fire.
That's a great comparison.
She described Grace's mindset as, you just have to figure it out, gotta do what you gotta do. She isn't operating on tactical brilliance, she is operating on pure, unadulterated base survival instinct. She's hopeless, she's borderline insane from the trauma, and more than anything, she just wants to go to sleep.
That physical and mental exhaustion becomes a primary antagonist in and of itself. And it raises an immediate logistical question regarding her physical state.
Because she is wrecked.
Throughout the first film, Grace takes an immense amount of physical damage. She gets a bullet through the hand, she is beaten, she's thrown around, and she ends up taking a rusted metal bar straight through her shoulder. She is physically decimated.
And here's a wildly interesting tidbit from the behind-the-scenes featurettes regarding those injuries. The creative team heavily debated how to handle her physical limitations in the sequel.
It's a tricky problem to solve.
At one point, there was a fully scrapped concept in the script where Grace was just going to be heavily popping pain medications throughout the entire runtime to deal with the agony of the shot hand and the pierced shoulder.
Oh, wow.
They originally planned to have her navigating the sequel in a medicated hazy stupor just to justify how she could physically keep running.
And it is a profound creative victory that they abandoned that concept.
You think so?
Absolutely. From a dramaturgical standpoint, if your protagonist is numb to their own physical pain, the audience becomes insulated from the stakes. The listener, the viewer, we need to feel the physical toll of the environment.
That makes sense.
By stripping away the pain medication and forcing Grace to feel every single ache, relying entirely on the desperate propulsion of adrenaline, it grounds the narrative in a gritty, tactile reality. It makes every step she takes, every punch she throws, cost something. It makes the survival visceral rather than cinematic.
It forces us to be right there in the agony with her. So she's exhausted, she's physically battered, she's covered in dried blood, and she's waking up in a hospital. But this brings up the most glaring question of the entire premise.
Right.
If Grace utterly decimated the Domas family in the first movie, if they are all literally in pieces, who is hunting her now?
This is where Section 3 of our sources details a massive expansion of the franchise's mythology. The writers are blowing the doors off the world building.
They really are.
We learn that the Domas family, with their bizarre hide-and-seek ritual, wasn't an isolated incident. They weren't the only ones playing this demonic high-stakes game with the entity known as Mr. LaBelle.
Which completely recontextualizes the first movie. It wasn't just one weird family, it was part of a larger system.
Precisely. By surviving until dawn and effectively wiping out her in-laws, Grace didn't just win her freedom. She inadvertently broke the system and unlocked the next level of this demonic wager.
Next level.
She is now being forced to compete for the high seat of a council that supposedly controls the world.
It's the ultimate escalation. It's as if she finally managed to be the hardest boss in a single-player game, only to have the game immediately drop her into a cutthroat, massive multiplayer server where every top-tier player is instantly hunting her.
That is the perfect analogy.
The sources indicate there are 4 rival families actively hunting Grace for this vacant throne. And looking closely at the cast list provided in the entertainment articles, we can definitively piece together the names of these global syndicates.
We have the Danforths, the Al-Qaedas, the Rajans, and the Wanchang family.
The screenwriting pivot here is structurally brilliant, but incredibly risky.
Very risky.
Yeah.
Moving a contained, single-location thriller like A Mansion in the Woods into a sprawling global conspiracy often dilutes the tension.
It gets too big.
But they're grounding it in the lore established in the first film. The synopsis explicitly states these are the wealthiest and most influential families on Earth. That this isn't just about preserving a bizarre rural tradition anymore.
No.
These families risk losing their unimaginable global power, their corporate empires, and their vast fortunes if Grace manages to survive this new gauntlet and claim the high seat.
Now, obviously, Grace's initial reaction is a hard pass. She just wants to go home. She explicitly refuses to participate in this demonic billionaire battle royale.
Naturally.
But you don't just say no to a global cabal of bloodthirsty elites. When she refuses, the council immediately forces her hand by introducing a devastating new variable. They mark her younger, entirely estranged sister, Faith, for death.
That's the hook.
If Grace doesn't step onto the playing field, her sister gets slaughtered.
Elijah Wood, who has a very mysterious role in this sequel, provided a fantastic quote to the press about this specific narrative expansion. He stated that the sequel deepens the mythology and enriches everything you love about the original.
Enriches everything you love.
And when you pause to consider the implications of this world building, it's staggering. If these 4 families truly pull the strings of the global infrastructure, if they control the central banks, the geopolitical boundaries, the major corporations, then Grace's fight for survival takes on a terrifying macro scale.
She isn't just fighting for her own pulse. A victory for Grace implies the total upending of the global power structure.
Exactly.
She is essentially a one-woman wrecking ball aimed at the foundation of the world economy. But the beauty of this sequel is that she isn't swinging that wrecking ball completely alone.
No, she has a partner.
Section 4 of our deep dive is all about the introduction of the sister dynamic, which adds a completely fresh, chaotic flavor to the narrative. Kathryn Newton has been cast as Faith, the estranged younger sister.
Kathryn Newton is an inspired piece of casting here. She has an established, highly effective working relationship with Radio Silence, having just starred in their vampire film Abigail.
She knows how they operate.
She already inherently understands the very specific, syncopated rhythm of their horror comedy direction.
And we actually have a wealth of visual data on how this dynamic plays out because in a very rare move, Rotten Tomatoes dropped a massive 8-minute extended sneak peek of the movie back on February 23.
An 8-minute clip is practically a short film in itself.
It really is, and it gives us so much to analyze for you. In this sequence, we see Grace and Faith hiding out in what looks like an abandoned utility room, desperately trying to take a breath and tend to each other's wounds. But the critical visual detail here is that the 2 sisters are physically handcuffed together.
The physical tethering of 2 characters is a time-honored, incredibly stressful trope in action and thriller cinema.
It's so anxiety-inducing.
And of the Defiant Ones, or even Hitchcock's, The 39 Steps, it forces total cooperation under the most extreme, panic-inducing duress. It physically manifests their inability to escape each other, forcing them to literally move in sync to survive.
It is so tense. In the clip, they are furiously working to cut the cuffs off, but the second the metal snaps and they are separated, they're ambushed by a masked antagonist wielding a massive sword.
Out of nowhere.
What follows is this incredibly high-intensity, claustrophobic scuffle. They're scrambling, throwing things, taking massive hits, but working together, they finally manage to neutralize the guy. It is chaotic, it is bloody, and it shows that Faith is completely out of her depth, while Grace is running on pure muscle memory from the first movie.
Which highlights a fundamental shift in Grace's character archetype. If you analyze her behavior in the first film, she was the quintessential lone survivor.
Very solitary.
Her screen time was largely defined by isolation. Sneaking silently through dark corridors, hiding in dumbwaiters, and frantically muttering to herself, famously whispering, "For fuck's sake," every time the situation worsened.
It became her catchphrase.
She only had to worry about her own body.
Yeah.
Now, by introducing an estranged sibling, she is violently thrust into a leadership position. She is the veteran of the bloodbath. She has to become the protector and the teacher to a sister she hasn't even spoken to in years.
It completely changes the emotional geometry of the scenes. Samara Weaving actually broke down this dynamic beautifully in the Collider interview.
How does she describe it?
She compared their on-screen relationship to Thelma and Louise, but mapped onto a horror setting.
That's brilliant.
Right. She described Grace as the grounded, pragmatic Susan Sarandon archetype. She is the one desperately trying to maintain control, saying, okay, here's the plan, here's how we navigate this, stay behind me.
And Faith.
And Faith is the wild, erratic, highly unpredictable Gina Davis archetype, who is liable to panic or do something impulsive that gets them both killed.
That dynamic introduces a terrifying, unpredictable variable into Grace's survival strategy. The environment is deadly enough, but now she has to constantly manage the emotional and physical volatility of her own sister.
And the chemistry required to pull that off has to be authentic, which, based on the sources, it absolutely is. The Reddit AMA the cast participated in gave us incredible insight into their off-screen dynamic.
It was a very revealing AMA.
Yeah, there is a fascinating piece of trivia here. Weaving and Newton actually both worked on the Oscar-winning film 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri years ago, but they were in entirely different scenes and never actually crossed paths on set.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Now that they are finally sharing the screen, they apparently act like absolute menaces behind the scenes. They are constantly pranking the crew and each other.
Has sibling energy.
During the video interview, Weaving suddenly busted out this incredibly loud, pitch-perfect impression of Newton complaining about the production logistics. She just belted out, "Jesus Christ, the parking here, Matt!" imitating Newton yelling at the director.
That's hilarious.
The whole cast lost it. You can see they have that immediate, abrasive but loving sibling energy.
That kind of genuine off-screen rapport is invaluable.
Yeah.
It almost always bleeds into the performances, creating a lived-in authenticity that you simply cannot manufacture through writing alone. But there is a much deeper, more poignant layer to this sisterly reunion that Weaving revealed. During the pre-production of the sequel, Weaving went back into her archives and pulled out her original actors' notebooks from the first film.
I love when actors do this.
6 years ago, when she was initially building the character of Grace, she felt she needed an internal justification for why a supposedly normal, blushing bride suddenly possessed the sheer grit and ferocity to dismantle a family of armed billionaires.
Right, because she wasn't a trained killer.
So, purely for herself, she created a private backstory where Grace grew up in the foster care system, constantly shuffled between gnarly, abusive situations where she had to literally fight for every scrap of safety she ever had.
That is such an incredible piece of character architecture. It completely reframes the first movie. It wasn't that she magically learned how to fight. It was that the pampered Domas family accidentally triggered a deeply buried, lifelong survival instinct in a woman who grew up fighting.
Precisely. And what is so masterful about the sequel script is that the returning writers have now officially canonized that private backstory.
They made it real.
By physically bringing her estranged sister into the narrative, the film forces all of that unhealed, latent childhood trauma to the surface. The conflict isn't just about dodging swords and bullets anymore. It is an emotional confrontation between two survivors of a broken system, happening squarely in the middle of a demonic bloodbath.
It adds so much emotional weight to the gore. And speaking of the bloodbath, we have to talk about the absolute murderer's row of talent they have assembled to hunt these sisters down.
Section 5 of our outline.
Yes, dedicated to the slasher fans' dream cast, the incredibly deliberate cult homages, and some of the most bizarre and hilarious quirks we pulled from that massive Reddit AMA.
The ensemble they have built to populate these 4 global families is undeniably rich with genre pedigree. They have surrounded Weaving and Newton with actors who carry decades of cinematic history.
The roster is stunning. Let's look at the breakdown. We have Sarah Michelle Gellar stepping in to play Ursula Danforth.
Iconic.
We have the legendary auteur David Cronenberg acting in the role of Chester Danforth. Sean Haidacy rounds out that clan as Titus Danforth. Then we have Elijah Wood, who is intriguingly credited simply as the lawyer.
The lawyer, I love that.
Plus, you add in Nestor Carbonell as Ignacio El Caido, Kevin Durand as Bill Wilkinson, Olivia Cheng playing Wan Chen Ching, and Daniel Byrne as Kip Danforth.
From an analytical perspective, you really have to admire the metatextual brilliance of this casting strategy, particularly regarding the heads of the Danforth family.
How so?
By casting Sarah Michelle Gellar and David Cronenberg, the filmmakers are having a direct conversation with the audience's knowledge of the genre. You are taking the ultimate 1990s final girl and vampire slayer, a pop culture icon of righteous monster hunting, and you are placing her alongside the man widely acknowledged as the godfather of cinematic body horror.
The Godfather himself.
Putting those 2 towering figures of the genre into the roles of villainous aristocratic billionaires hunting our protagonist is a stroke of casting genius. It layers the viewing experience with intertextual reverence.
And the production leans into that reverence so heavily. The AMA gifted us with a massive Easter egg that is going to make genre fans lose their minds. A fan asked about the choreography of a specific fight scene between Grace and Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, Ursula.
What did they say?
Kathryn Newton hijacked the question and revealed that the wardrobe department dressed Grace for this specific confrontation in an outfit that is an exact stitch-for-stitch replica of an iconic outfit Buffy wore in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That is fantastic.
Newton playfully claimed it was a total accident, but let's be real. In a production this meticulous, you don't accidentally dress the protagonist in Buffy's clothes to fight Sarah Michelle Gellar. It is the ultimate visual homage.
Whether they maintain the facade of it being accidental or proudly claim it as the work of a remarkably clever costume designer, it is precisely the kind of granular detail that elevates the film for dedicated audiences.
It rewards the fans.
It transforms a standard fight scene into a meta-commentary on the evolution of the final girl archetype across different eras of horror. And while we are discussing the cast, we cannot overlook the sheer chaotic promise of Elijah Wood's character.
The lawyer.
In a separate interview, Wood teased that the sequel features an insane death within the first 5 minutes of the runtime.
Which tells you everything you need to know about the pacing. They are not slowly building the tension, they are grabbing you by the throat immediately. And the AMA really highlighted how perfectly weird this entire cast is.
They're a very eclectic crew.
The non-movie-related tangents they went on gave us such a vivid picture of the personalities on set. For instance, a fan asked Samara Weaving about her legendary guttural scream, the one that became iconic in the first film.
Right, it's very distinct.
She actually revealed the true origin of that scream, and it didn't happen on the set of Ready or Not. It originated years prior when she was shooting a guest spot on the television series Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Oh, that makes sense.
She said the director simply told her that a possessed house was about to attack her, and he needed her to scream as loudly as possible. She let it rip, and she said she had literally never heard a sound like that come out of her own vocal cords before. The entire crew stopped and applauded her.
Wow.
But my absolute favorite detail is that she mentioned a commenter online once accurately described her scream as a yodel.
It is a highly textured, deeply unsettling yodel.
A supersonic yodel of pure terror. She also dropped a fascinating tidbit about her dream project. She said in the AMA that her ultimate goal is to adapt the true story of a World War II Australian female spy who led a faction of the French resistance and supposedly killed Nazis with her bare hands.
That sounds incredible.
The visual of Samara Weaving channeling her horror survival energy into a historical World War II action epic is something a studio needs to greenlight yesterday.
The AMA also provided some wonderful, highly idiosyncratic insights into Elijah Wood. When a fan asked him about his ultimate comfort movies, he provided a wonderfully specific pairing. He chose Groundhog Day, which is a structural masterpiece.
A classic.
But he paired it with the 1991 dark comedy Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. He noted it was heavily in rotation on HBO during his formative years.
It's such a perfect, nostalgic 90s kid answer, but the crown jewel of Elijah Wood's AMA participation was his response to a Lord of the Rings question.
Oh, of course there was a Lord of the Rings question.
Someone asked him if Frodo and Sam somehow had a portable Bluetooth speaker and a Spotify account during their trek through Middle-earth, what would they be listening to?
Very specific.
Wood didn't miss a beat. He gave the most meticulously nerdy, pitch-perfect answer. He said they would absolutely be listening to pastoral 1960s British psychedelic folk music, and he specifically named the band Pentangle. You can just perfectly envision Frodo sitting against a tree in the Shire, stressing about the ring, listening to acoustic 60s psych folk.
It demonstrates a lovely, enduring engagement with the character that defined his early career. And contrasting that deeply serene musical image, you had Kathryn Newton providing a rather bleakly ironic observation about her own trajectory in Hollywood.
Oh, it was so funny, but so tragic. She explicitly pleaded in the AMA that she desperately just wants to be cast in a traditional, lighthearted romantic comedy.
Just a rom-com.
She wants to wear a nice outfit, kiss a boy, and deliver funny dialogue without anyone getting dismembered. But she joked that no matter what she signs on for, her projects inevitably mutate into blood-soaked horror films.
Well, considering the logistics detailed in Section 6 of our sources, her wish for a clean, lighthearted rom-com certainly did not materialize on the set of Ready or Not 2.
Definitely not.
Which brings us perfectly to the actual mechanics of the action, the physical toll on the performers, and the sheer staggering volume of practical effects the production utilized.
Let's get into the gore, because they are not holding back. The MPA officially handed down an R rating for the sequel, and the specific citation notes strong bloody violence, gore, pervasive language, and brief drug use.
The standard horror rating.
We already know Grace isn't taking pain meds, so that brief drug use might just be a character hitting a panic joint before the chaos starts. But the core of that rating is the bloody violence.
The commitment to practical effects over CGI blood is a hallmark of Radio Silence's directorial style. Colin Penman, the makeup department head, provided a quote to the press that should be incredibly reassuring to practical horror aficionados.
What did he say?
He explicitly detailed the deployment of what he termed giant blood cannons on set.
Giant blood cannons.
In fact, the scale of the carnage was so massive that the production actually completely exhausted their local supply of fake blood. They literally ran dry and had to commission emergency shipments of extra vats from Toronto just to complete a single massive explosion sequence.
Just visualize the logistics of that for a second. An emergency freight truck hauling 50-gallon drums of industrial fake blood across the border because the directors decided the explosion wasn't wet enough. It is glorious.
It's beautiful.
But we have to acknowledge that achieving that level of practical, visceral action requires a severe physical toll from the cast. Weaving casually revealed in an interview that she suffered a severe leg injury immediately before principal photography began on the sequel.
Oh, that's rough.
The injury was so debilitating she could barely walk normally, let alone execute the high-impact parkour and fight choreography required to escape a mansion full of assassins.
This is a critical point where we must highlight the unsung backbone of the action industry. Because Weaving was physically compromised, the production had to lean heavily on her stunt double, Naomi.
Naomi the legend.
Naomi had to step in and absorb the vast majority of the brutal, high-impact choreography, taking the physical punishment so the production could stay on schedule.
Absolute massive shout out to Naomi because the action set pieces that Weaving teased sound borderline unhinged.
What kind of set pieces?
She enthusiastically described a few specific sequences that give us a great feel for the movie's tone. She detailed a massive, sprawling fight inside a luxurious grand ballroom where Grace has to square off against an unhinged lady in a wedding dress.
Which makes you wonder, is this another bride who survived a different family's game? Or just a crazed assassin?
We don't know yet. But the best detail is the weaponry. Weaving noted that this brutal fight somehow incorporates a massive, multi-tiered wedding cake and an electronic musical keyboard as primary weapons.
That specific detail, weaponizing a cake and a keyboard, perfectly encapsulates the unique directorial signature of Radio Silence.
They love doing that.
If you analyze their filmography, they excel at subverting the safety of domestic or celebratory environments. They take mundane, recognizable items and violently repurpose them into instruments of survival. A keyboard is a prop for a wedding band, until you're trapped in a global conspiracy, at which point it becomes a blunt force weapon. It grounds the absurdity of the violence in a recognizable reality.
And to cap it all off, Weaving dropped one final, incredibly cryptic tease in her interview. She just smiled at the camera and mentioned the visceral joy of, quote, putting people in washing machines.
Putting people in washing machines.
I have absolutely no idea who is getting violently shoved into the spin cycle or how a washing machine factors into a billionaire's mansion, but I am entirely here for it.
It certainly implies a level of dynamic environmental combat where the characters are utilizing every single appliance and architectural feature of their surroundings to maximize both the physical trauma and the dark comedy.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's take a breath and synthesize this incredible journey we've taken you through with the source material.
We've looked at a lot.
We started by looking at a completely traumatized, blood-soaked Grace waking up in a hospital with absolutely 0 seconds to process the explosive finale of the first movie. We tracked how the mythology of the franchise radically expands outwards, evolving from one eccentric family's isolated rural tradition into a terrifying global conspiracy orchestrated by a high council of 4 world-controlling families.
We analyzed how the strategic introduction of Grace's estranged sister, Faith, fundamentally shifts Grace's character arc, forcing her to confront her own deeply buried childhood trauma and reluctantly step into the role of a leader and protector.
We marveled at the absolutely legendary meta-brilliant cast they've assembled, bringing towering horror icons like Sarah Michelle Gellar and David Cronenberg into the fray to hunt our protagonists. And finally, we looked at the massive scale of the practical effects, bracing ourselves for the sheer, unadulterated carnage of giant blood cannons, keyboard beatdowns, and whatever horrors await inside that mysterious washing machine.
You are now, without a doubt, armed with every piece of knowledge you need before the lights go down in the theater.
But before we conclude our analysis today, there's one final, lingering provocation that emerges from examining the expanded lore of this sequel. It is something for you to seriously ponder long after this discussion ends.
The narrative clearly establishes that these 4 rival families currently sit on a high council that literally dictates the global infrastructure. They control the flow of capital, the global economy, and the overarching societal structure.
Right, they are the keystone holding the corrupted world together.
Exactly. So consider the terrifying macro implications if Grace actually succeeds. If she miraculously survives until dawn, systematically executes the heads of these families, and rightfully claims the high seat of the council for herself, what happens to the world?
That's the million-dollar question.
By dismantling this demonic system and killing the billionaires who quietly run the planet, will Grace inadvertently trigger the catastrophic total collapse of global society?
Oh, wow. So her personal victory could literally be the apocalypse for everyone else.
It is a phenomenal narrative paradox. Or, perhaps even more chillingly, to prevent that global economic collapse and keep the world functioning, will the ultimate final girl be forced to actually take the throne? Will Grace have to become the very monster she has spent 2 movies desperately trying to destroy?
That is such a heavy, incredible concept to chew on. From a terrified runaway bride to the demonic CEO of the entire world. I have chills. Thank you so much for sitting down and joining us for this deep dive. We are incredibly excited for you to take all this rigorous analysis, the industry context, and every bizarre behind-the-scenes detail with you when you finally sit down to experience the madness of Ready or Not 2. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface and keep diving deep.